As they say in hockey, let's do that hockey.
Play a full 60 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep it simple.
Get pucks deep, bring the puck deep.
Put pucks in deep.
We got to keep it simple and just get pucks going forward.
Getting into the forecheck.
We got to keep playing aggressive.
Trying to take away their time and space.
We're focused on tonight. We just got to stick to our game.
The LA Dodgers are world champions of baseball. Election season has come and gone, and American politics are running wild. PWHL jerseys are just about to drop, and the Fifth Liners Hockey Podcast is back for episode 17 with Jake Swanson. I'm Casey Ditzel. Jake, probably the lone spot that you can go anywhere on the internet that's not going to delve into the political situation in the United States. What's going on, buddy?
Nothing much, man. Just long day for everyone, I think, yesterday, and we're trying to just fill some moments with sports, and I think that's exactly what we're going to do right here. A lot of cool news coming out in the NHL as well as the NCAA hockey. So, gonna cover some of that, and I'm excited to talk with you, Casey.
We'll start with the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins swept the weekend, shutout wins over the Flyers and the Kraken, but instead of celebrating, the microscope falls on David Pastrnak's absence on Sunday. Jim Montgomery did not play the Bruins star one single shift during the third period against the Kraken. Post-game, Montgomery said that it was, quote, a coach's decision in the third period. That's all I'm going to comment on. After the weekend, the Bruins have gone from last in the Atlantic up to fifth, and all kinds of rumors swirling. Pastrnak back in the lineup against the Leafs, where they got blown out once again, and the struggles for Boston are imminent right now.
Yeah, Casey, and I mean, the decision to bench your star player is definitely a head-scratching one to everyone looking from outside in. But, I mean, Montgomery, you don't do that without a clear-cut reason internally. I mean, he's the guy that your franchise has locked up for multiple years, and ownership and the GM, like, they had to be weighing in on that decision post-game as well. So he had to be able to defend himself to the likes of ownership for that decision. So I'm assuming there's definitely going to be some kind of reason, but I'm definitely liking that the Bruins are starting to put some wins together. I mean, after they got blown out by your Canes, Casey, they went on a little bit of a winning streak there and ended by Toronto on Tuesday. So we'll see if they can get it together. Like we said before, this Atlantic is definitely one of those divisions that's going to be probably the tightest contested out of all of the divisions that we've seen so far. So interesting to see where this goes, and hopefully Pasta can go back to doing Pasta things.
The Toronto Maple Leafs doing everything they can to try to ensure that they don't have to see the Boston Bruins during the playoffs. And so far through the regular season, 2-0 on the season series. One win in Boston, one win yesterday in Toronto. The story of the weekend was goaltender interference. We talk about it almost every episode, and goaltender interference strikes again. The opening goal in the Winnipeg Jets versus Tampa Bay Lightning game on Sunday looked to be pretty clear interference against Connor Hellebuyck. The Jets challenged the play, but the goal is upheld. Afterwards, and even a day afterwards, Connor Hellebuyck had some pretty choice words about the situation and goes straight to the media saying his discontent, where he's spent a lot of time trying to help the NHL figure out the rules around goaltender interference, and said maybe it's time that I pass that on to someone else if my work is going to be completely unrecognized. The Jets go on to win the game 7-4, so it doesn't impact them in the point standings at all. But a very notable moment there, and goaltender interference continues to be the biggest head scratcher in all of hockey.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen it as commentators a bunch where there's a mess in front of the crease and nobody knows what's going on. And I think in that instance, it was definitely building up to that. But, I mean, looking at the video, it looks like there was at least some case that could be made for goaltender interference. Whether they want to say that it was with momentum or it wasn't intentional or any of the other reasons they give for it not being goaltender interference. I have a really hard time like sitting with calls like this when you send it to Toronto, you send it to the guys that have every single angle possible. And I mean, we've seen it in baseball for years with the instant replay system and the challenges. And we don't see it that often in hockey just because there's not, I feel like it's very, very much faster in the sense of how you have to challenge and your video coach getting like in your coach's ear, like, hey, we want to challenge that when the play is already halfway down the ice. So definitely tough for the Jets and Connor Hellebuck, but I mean, it did have me laughing a little bit that he put together a full PowerPoint presentation for the NHL to look at, like, hey, this is what goaltender interference looks like, and these are the detriments to goaltenders. Because, like, that's the other thing, too, is you got to keep your goaltenders safe. And it's shown in every possible way when players push other players away from their own goaltender. And this is just another example of, like, safety and abiding by the rules. Like, that's supposed to be what the league officials are there for. But in Hellebuck's opinion, didn't happen that night.
And it seems to be something that the NHL will never win on. You look back to the age-old controversial call, the Dallas Stars Stanley Cup game-winning goal against the Buffalo Sabres back in the 90s. Then they changed the rule where originally you couldn't be in the crease at all. Now you can be in the crease, and it seems to create even more controversy. So not sure whether the move would be to go back to nobody in the crease at all. And, Jake, in your mind, is there any way to solve the goaltender interference problem?
I honestly don't know. It's really a catch-22. And I think with what Hellebuck was saying, like, even if players are giving clear-cut examples of what should and should not be goaltender interference, there's so much to look at from the league's standpoint that it's just one issue and a lot of like issues that players bring up. So I think if it becomes more on a bigger stage, like you said, the Buffalo Dallas game, and if we get that like this year, if it comes in the Stanley Cup playoffs, I think then maybe they'll get more of a light to shine on it. Or if it was a game-defining situation for the Jets in this instance. But it's all about the public pressuring it, not the internal players. Because unfortunately, it seems like the league just hasn't really taken into account the opinions of the players on these kind of issues.
And with challenges now, it's almost guaranteed, with the exception of goaltender interference, that when a team makes the decision to challenge, it's going to be overturned. You have the full-time staff that their entire job as video coaches are to make sure they're on top of any possible ruling, whether it's offsides or any of the too many men on the ice, delay of game challenges. Now, they have it down to the pixel pretty much. Goaltender interference is the one that you never know whether or not it's going to come back. A very crazy one in challenges last night in the Colorado Avalanche Seattle Kraken game. It had a double challenge and then ended up overturned on the original one. Seattle Kraken challenge that Mikko Rantanen's goal was offsides. Arturi Lehkonen had brought the puck in clearly offside, so they challenge. It gets overturned. The goal gets wiped off the board. Well, in the Colorado Avalanche challenge, that it shouldn't have been called offsides, they go back farther in the video. The shot was taken by a Kraken player in the offensive zone. The puck goes off the end wall, hard down the ice, and that's where Lehkonen is standing as he fields the puck facing backwards across the blue line and where he was offsides. Well, since it's the Kraken player who last touched it, he's no longer offsides. They challenge the challenge. It gets overturned again, goal back on the board, and the Avalanche get a power play for the unsuccessful Seattle Kraken challenge. One of the craziest series I have ever watched. But goaltender interference, definitely the most volatile of any possible challenges. The Carolina Hurricanes are flaming hot right now. 9 wins in their last 10 games, a 6-game win streak. and wins this week over the Washington Capitals and Philadelphia Flyers. They will play the Pittsburgh Penguins at home on Thursday before a little bit of a tough road trip when they have to go back out west after just being west about a week and a half ago. They'll play Colorado and Vegas out there, but right now they are on their way up. They are tops of the Metro in points percentage. They are number 2 behind just Winnipeg, who has been red hot as well in the NHL points percentages. Marty Necas has been the real story behind the Carolina Hurricanes' success. 20 points in the last 11 games and a couple of absolutely gorgeous goals that he scored in the last 2 games. A silky goal where he went forehand, backhand, toasted the goaltender against Washington, and then an unbelievable shift in its entirety to close off the game yesterday in their win over Philadelphia, where they had offensive zone possession for about a minute and 15 seconds. He's doing all kinds of spinoramas and drop passes and just toasting the defensive players, working them down. Finally, with 28 seconds left in the game, the puck finds his stick and he bats it home as the Canes win the game. An excellent signing for Carolina in Necas. How great of a decision, though, on his part to take the bridge deal. He signs a 2-year, $6 million AAV contract where he wanted the big deal. All of his side was originally talking about how he was going to leave Carolina because he felt he wasn't getting the big enough role that he deserved. Well, the Canes had that atrocious offseason in respect to the forward core. Now Necas is getting a huge role in this offense, and after signing a very good bridge deal for 2 years, he's primed to get a monster contract upcoming.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about bridge deals before on the show, and it's just a really good way for both sides to just be like, hey, we don't see enough from one side. You have very overly inflated opinion of your skill, in our opinion, and let's just give you a couple years. If you prove us wrong, then we'll give you the money. If not, no harm done, really, because six mil a year, especially for Carolina in that market, it's not a huge hit for their forward core, especially when you haven't had to deal out a huge extension in a while. I mean, the biggest one they've had is Jarvis, I believe, in the most recent year. That you can correct me, but it just seems like it's been a good deal all around, and I think Marty Necas just proven a lot of people in that Carolina front office wrong, and I think they're happy that he's doing it, especially now because they've got him for 2 years, $6 million locked down, and now they can, if they need to, they have more cap room to build around, maybe at the deadline if they need someone, if someone goes down on injury. So really happy with how the Hurricanes are looking, and Casey is going to be one very happy fan at the end of this calendar year if they keep going the way they're going.
It was expected to be a down year. For me, it was the Winnipeg Jets that I was dogging on. How about them proving me wrong? After I said it was a team I had no interest in watching because of the low-flying offense, they lead the NHL in goals scored. Carolina on this show was just up there in that talks, and even I was low on how the Hurricanes were going to be this year. Many of our co-hosts, Jake, also extremely low on Carolina. Well, they have looked excellent early, and you got to think it's only going to get better as the season goes on with all kinds of new pieces that they added this offseason at low contracts. They're going to have $30 million of cap space going into next season.
Yeah, and I mean, the biggest thing for the Hurricanes right now is they're scoring very well, but they're also keeping the puck out of the net very, very well. I mean, the only team that has less goals against is the New York Rangers at 24. Carolina's sitting at 27, the average per game being 2.45. So they're doing a very, very good job on the defensive end as well. And I mean, you kind of have to do that with the young Peter Kochetkov, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But especially young goalies, you got to have that blue line out in front of them. And I think people like a Brent Burns, like a Shane Gostisbehere, they've been doing a very good job on the defensive end as well as on the power play as well. So I think that's a big thing. And I think Carolina's going to be looking real good. And Winnipeg not far behind them too. I mean, like you said, their offense insane right now. And if they keep looking like they're looking, that would be a fun matchup to look on. Actually, when do they play next? Do we know? I haven't checked the schedule because that's a game that I want to tune into.
I do not know off the top of my head. Let's see if I can pull it up quick. I know it's not on the upcoming road trip for Carolina. They're headed to Colorado, Vegas, and Utah. Winnipeg. Next game. Bear with us here for the viewers. I believe, actually, they play them on the road in February would be the next one. Yep. So a little while to watch, and hopefully they can both stay hot until then. But yeah, as you mentioned, two high-flying offenses, and both teams have done very well defensively. Obviously, Connor Hellebuck is a massive story for the defense of the Winnipeg Jets. Keeping it in somewhat relation to Carolina, a guy who continued a huge streak against them on Monday, Alex Ovechkin, the great chase for Wayne Gretzky. We mentioned it a little bit last week, but has exploded since then and now has 5 goals in his last 4 games, 7 total goals this season, and has upped the pace from 41 when we last spoke, now targeting a 50-goal season, on pace for 52 goals.
Yeah, and I mean, he just keeps doing it. And I mean, we talked about it last time too, is like he's only getting like 15 to 20 minutes of ice time a game at the maximum. And most of that coming on the power plays. He's only had 1 power play goal in those 11 games, and he's still on pace. So he's doing it on the ice, like basically almost every time he touches the ice, which is insanity, especially coming up on 40 years old. So I think that he's going to have a real shot to catch Gretzky here in a little bit, and we're going to be witnessing some hockey history here soon.
Clarkson Golden Knights connection. Today, as we record, November 6th, it was 20 year. Actually, it would have been more than that. I think it was 30 years ago today. Dave Taylor took a one-punch knockout to Wayne Gretzky. Dave Taylor, all-time leading scorer of the Clarkson Golden Knights, and knocked out Gretzky when the Kings played the Oilers. It would have been 30 years ago today, back in what would that be?
94?
Actually, no, it must have. It
So
would have
40
been,
years.
It was 40. Yeah, 84. How about that for my math coming out of the engineering school? You can
Yeah, there you go. Were they
see how much
were they ever line mates? That's a question I always had. Were they ever line mates? Because Taylor was always Kings. I don't know if he was still there when Gretzky was there.
That I'm not sure. That would be a Bob Alfeld question. He's the Dave Taylor tire pumper.
Yeah, he is.
Dave Taylor, a guy we should get on the podcast here sometime. Former legendary NHLer, but also general manager of the LA Kings, and now has a Stanley Cup under his belt after raising it with the St. Louis Blues. He's been scouting for the Blues for the last couple of seasons, but definitely a guy that would be awesome to talk with. Gretzky played for the Edmonton Oilers, a team that is catching fire, and without their captain, Connor McDavid, since his absence, the Oilers put up a couple of wins in 2 straight. The Devils knocked that streak off, so Edmonton 2-1, and McDavid will now return to the lineup tonight against Vegas. Leon Draisaitl has been a key to the Oilers' success. 6 points in the first 2 games without McDavid. He had 2 goals and an assist in their 5-1 win on the road at Nashville last Thursday. Added a goal and 2 assists in their 4-2 win over Calgary on Sunday. And Leon Draisaitl proving why his contract that he signed over the offseason, the biggest AAV contract in NHL history, was worth it, and that he can get it done without the NHL's big star.
Yeah, and I mean, you gotta kind of expect that, and that's exactly what Edmonton needed when McDavid was hurt, was to have their number 2 guy, who really isn't a number 2 guy. He's almost a 1A, 1B with McDavid, and he, on any other team, he would be the franchise cornerstone. So yeah, had to expect that he was going to step up, and I'm glad he really did because the Oilers desperately needed it. I mean, they didn't have as rough of a start to the season like they did last year, but they definitely had a rough start, not one they were expecting after a trip to the Stanley Cup Finals. So we'll see if McDavid's return, if he can just step right into that role, right back where he was, and they can keep producing like they were while he was gone, or if maybe there's some rust to shake off with the lines after not seeing him for 2 to 3 weeks. So interested to see. I think that'll be a good game against Vegas tonight. 2 Pacific contenders that should be a good matchup for us to watch.
I think I'm expecting another Draisaitl point here tonight. It'll be interesting to see, as you mentioned, if McDavid picks up on his line. I think you could see a bit of a slow start, maybe one slow game before McDavid gets it rolling again. The NHL was on show to the world last weekend, the Global Series in Finland, where the Florida Panthers picked up a weekend sweep, beating Dallas 6-4 on Friday and 4-2 on Saturday. Alexander Barkov with 5 points in 2 games, returning to his home country in Finland. That included a 4-point night on Friday with a goal and 3 assists. He had points in 4 of the 6 goals that Florida put up. The NHL announced that Finland will remain part of the Global Series rotation after the success and the sold-out crowds on back-to-back nights there, Jake. Awesome atmosphere. How about the Florida Panthers? They are contenders, and another team, just like the Hurricanes, maybe even more to that note that we had set for regression this offseason that look like they are going to be no slouches to contend for another Stanley Cup after beating Dallas, who was the preseason favorite to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely been a little bit of a hangover, like we talked about with the Stanley Cup, but I think they've picked themselves up a little bit faster than we expected, and that's really great for them. That means that they don't have to start the start of the new calendar year in the hole like they would have if our predictions had gone right. So very excited to see the result against Dallas, especially being on Barkov's home ice and seeing some really cool storylines come out of it. One that I want to touch on is the tradition in Finland of wearing the golden helmet in practice, and the guys, the Americans, the Canadians, they didn't really know what was going on, and everybody tried to give Barkov the helmet, actually, and the golden helmet's supposed to go to the team's leading point scorer, which is Sam Reinhart. So Barkey, according to sources, was just like, no, let Sam wear it, like he's the point scorer, which was a really cool moment, because I mean, he could have been like, oh yeah, it's my home country, I'll take that, don't worry. And he honored the tradition that the Finns are into. So that was really cool. And watching the interview with Reinhardt afterwards, he's like, yeah, I took a couple shifts with it, and then I took it off because it didn't feel right. But it was still a cool moment, and hopefully we get more of that when the Global Series continues. So
Panthers and Dallas, 2 teams that we could see in the Stanley Cup. Which team between the 2 would you pick as the favorite after watching the Panthers sweep the weekend?
Ooh, it's such a hard one. And for me, it's a little too early, but I will say my little too early pick after that is it's got to be Florida. And now that they have their Stanley Cup run experience, and now that Bob has finally lifted that trophy and looked outstanding in the playoffs, I think that kind of experience is huge. And I mean, you've got young stars on that Stars team, no pun intended, like a Jason Robertson, who have been in the playoffs but haven't been that far yet. So having those veterans with that experience is huge. And that's why a lot of these teams bring in like older pieces at the deadline. And like in Vegas when they had Phil Kessel for their cup run. I mean, it's veterans like that kind of provide the steadying hand and be like, yeah, I've been here before. This is what you can expect. So I think with that, like Dallas has that veteran contingency, but Florida's got that recency bias. So I'm going to have to go with Florida, but I mean, the Stars were preseason favorites for a reason, so don't count them out just yet.
I think I would still side with the Stars, but Florida certainly has upped the impression of National Hockey League fans. Scary moment on Tuesday night. Dylan Holloway takes a puck to the net, finishes his shift, nearly scores a goal, and then comes back to the bench. Had to be stretchered off the bench after his neck and the inflammation from the impact of the puck caused him to lose consciousness there on the bench. Fortunately, good news came quickly after that. The quote from this morning's press conference from Holloway saying, "I feel good today. I feel way better. Obviously, it was a scary situation. From what I've been told, the puck hit my vagus nerve in my neck. As soon as I got hit, I knew something was a little off. But then I saw we had a 2-on-1, so I couldn't pass up that opportunity. As soon as I got to the bench, I felt a little woozy, and I don't remember much after that until I was on the stretcher." Jake, very scary watching that happen. Fortunately, pretty soon after he had got to the hospital, he was taken out of the rink in an ambulance. The good news came out that it wasn't going to be a long-term injury. He was going to be all right, and that he was already feeling much better. But just another, reminder of how dangerous this game can be there. And Holloway, fortunately, comes away unscathed, and that could have been a really scary situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely very scary. And anytime there's anything above the neck, like, it's just, ugh. So prayers up to Holloway. Hopefully there's no long-term lasting effects from that. I know I've seen my fair share, so have you, Casey, of pucks going into players where they definitely shouldn't be. The most memorable for me was watching my first Blue Jackets game, and Boone Jenner took one right in the jaw, broke his jaw, and he was out for 6 to 8 weeks last year. And actually, it was right around this time last year, so probably about a year ago. And it was one of the scariest things. You could hear the arena kind of go silent, and it's very scary. So glad he's all right, and hopefully there's no long-term effects there.
Trade talks, always fun, and it's starting to ramp up here. We're just at the start of November. Plenty of time until the March trade deadline, but time to highlight a few teams that might be in negotiations in the near term here. We'll start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs made some action already, opening the season up with a trade for defenseman Timothy Liljegren, who they send to San Jose. They bring back Matt Benning and a pair of draft picks, which the Maple Leafs need desperately. They don't have a great draft stock, so that'll help them out. Yanni Hakanpää and Connor Dewar both are set to return to the lineup soon. So Toronto is pretty soon to be tight on roster spots. Benning could be a potential candidate for a trade flip. Teams like Edmonton, who are looking to bolster their defense, could benefit from adding a top four guy. Not sure Benning would suit that caliber, but an interesting start where Toronto is active early, even though they've been a pretty solid team so far.
Yeah, and I think they know that they have a decent amount of depth in the forward and the D-core. That not enough to bring back all the picks they need, but maybe just to kind of satiate their need for a couple of guys that they can target later in the draft this year. So I was a fan of this, especially with Liljegren going to San Jose. That gives them another NHL caliber player to kind of get some minutes in and protect their young guys. So very big fan of that trade. And yeah, I agree. I think Edmonton could benefit from Benning. I think that would be a good flip. I don't know what picks Edmonton has right now, but maybe some conditional ones in the later rounds and trying to bring him over. And if Toronto gets a couple of picks again from Benning, that gives them 4 draft picks for 2 players. And I think they'd see that as a win.
Toronto, the one team out of the 4 that we're going to talk about that's in the top half of the NHL right now. Colorado is actively seeking to add to their forward core. with 5 of their top 9 currently out of the lineup. It was 6 of the top 9, but Arturi Lehkonen returned to the lineup last night. An outstanding showing for him, 2 points in his return to the lineup, and obviously a massive addition to the hurting Colorado power play. Valenchushkin could be set to come back next week. He's been skating with skating at the team facilities, not with the team, but returning to action. He'll be able to skate with the team next week, and as soon as he gets reinstated, can come back to the Colorado Avalanche lineup. Miles Wood also could be coming back this week. So the Avalanche starting to become maybe a favorite to make a big run deep. And I was looking at some of the DraftKings odds on futures. How about this one? Plus 800 to win the Central Division, plus 600 to win the Western Conference. Make that one make sense to me, that it's going to be harder for them to win the Central than the West, because if they win the West, they have to win the Central. So sneaky by the odds makers, and a baffling one if you're looking for maybe a cheat code. They're going to have to get past the Winnipeg Jets, but I absolutely love where Colorado is. On the trade front, they've been linked to potentially the Toronto Maple Leafs and forward Nick Robertson, also with Utah for Michael Sarconi, and the Islanders potentially for Brock Nelson. Cap restrictions would make Brock Nelson a very tough get. The other 2 guys are on entry-level $775,000 deals that would be much easier to get, Jake. But Colorado quickly getting back to health, and if they can get another top 6 or even any sort of forward addition to go with the limited roster they have, watch out.
Yeah, and I think one team I'll throw into the mix there for maybe potentially forward depth for Colorado is Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh has a lot of different guys up there that are still on entry levels or early on in their veteran deals. And someone like maybe a Ricard Raquel or a Lars Eller or a Michael Bunting, someone like that could really help. And if they want to go young, you got Drew O'Connor, former Dartmouth stud, and love seeing the ECAC make an appearance, as we always do. But yeah, I think if Colorado can get 1 or 2 forwards that can sit in their top 6, top 9, and when all of their forwards become healthy again, just become like a depth piece or a taxi squad member, I think that's the biggest thing for them. So hopefully they stay healthy after this. And yeah, I'm excited to see if there's any other trades that are going to be a little bit early in the season.
Buffalo Sabres are 5-7-1 to start the season, a .423 points percentage. And Kevin Adams looking to bolster the Sabres roster after slow starts from key players in Dylan Cousins, Jack Quinn, and Juraj Kulich. As of November 1st, Buffalo is 17th in goals per game right now at 3.18, a big decline from their 2022-23 team that ranked 3rd in the NHL at the end of the season, 3.57 goals they were scoring. Think back to the huge seasons that Alex Tuch and Tage Thompson had, Jeff Skinner as well. Well, Skinner got bought out now. They didn't really do anything to add. So a lot of open cap space for Buffalo. Not sure where they are looking to go, but hopefully a top 6 is what they're trying to attain.
Yeah, and looking more into the stats for Buffalo this season, I think a big get would be someone on their power play line. And right now, their power play hovering just under 13%, 12.8%. And that's the second worst in the league, only behind the Capitals, who are at 10.8%. So it's definitely something offensive. I think their defense has been good enough to win you games. They've got a negative goal differential right now, but I think with the options they have in net and their blue line, I think they're good enough to win a little bit. But if you're not scoring more than, it sounds stupid, but if you're not scoring more than you're allowing, then you're not going to win very many games. So I think the power play is an issue of concern, and hopefully they can address that.
7th in the Atlantic, 25th overall in the NHL. The Nashville Predators, another team that is on red alert right now. Predators GM Barry Trotz told Nashville radio station The Game He hopes to add a centerman at some point, but also joins Calgary and Chicago in the same hope. And Trotz also noted that most teams are not looking for trades right now. But also coming out this week was that Trotz noting potentially if the Predators can't turn it around quickly here, they might be looking to trade some of these assets away and start that rebuild that was talked about before they went out and had this huge offseason bringing in all kinds of star talent.
Yeah, and I mean Nashville is just the latest in recent teams to just go on a huge spending spree, not really worrying about the chemistry on the lines or the mesh in the system for Nashville. So I mean they got a lot of big names and they got a lot of talent on the roster, but I mean, if you look at the top teams right now, like a Winnipeg, like a Florida, they have the star talent, but they also have the depth to back it up. And I think that's where Nashville might be lacking just a little bit, is if their depth can't step up and help when their stars are off, then when your stars are off, you're not going to get any offense. And that's kind of been what's been going on. And I mean, they're tied for second in the least goals for per game. Just goals for with 29. They're tied with the Red Wings, and their only worst team in that is the Ducks, and we know how the Ducks offense is. So it's definitely possible that they start the rebuild. I think, though, that it's a little too early for them to pull the trigger on a rebuild. I would want to see a full, at least 3/4 of a season of this team playing together, because maybe they're just a slow starter, and maybe once we hit January, February, they get really hot. So I'm not sure if it's a wise decision to just cut ties with guys you sign multi-year deals with. But, I mean, that's totally up to them. And if Barry Trotz has a feeling, I mean, there's a reason he's in an NHL seat and I'm not. So hopefully they make the correct decision for the Nashville Predators, because this would be a really fun team to watch come the Stanley Cup playoffs.
That does it for the headline segment. Upcoming, Anthony Callin will guest with us, but first time to cover our impressed and depressed. Jake, let's start on the positive note. Who's impressing you this week?
So for me, like you said, with the sweep of the global series, the Florida Panthers just look really, really good. And I mean, with what they're doing, I'm just impressed. Like, they're 9-3-1 to start the season. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10, and they've won their last 5. So, I mean, they're just hot right now, and hopefully they can keep that going, keep the Maple Leafs, the Lightning, the Bruins at bay in that Atlantic. Because right now, I mean, Toronto's only 3 points behind, Tampa Bay is only 5 points behind, and the Bruins are 6. So, still within reach in that Atlantic division. Like we said, a lot of movement can happen there. So, impressed with them. Second for me is going to be the Vegas Golden Knights. And they were a team where we were kind of by default putting them to get out of the Pacific in our predictions. But they look like they're going to earn it this year, especially early. 8-3-1. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. Got a plus 17 goal differential right now, which is huge. That means their offense is working really well. And, I mean, people like a Mark Stone, people like an Alex Pietrangelo, a Shea Theodore, they've been really, really good to start the season. So, very impressed with them. And last but not least for me, it's going to be the Minnesota Wild. And I'm really happy with this one. I really want Minnesota to be good. They've just been kind of middling or just barely a playoff team for, honestly, most of the time I've been following NHL, which has only been the past couple of years. And to see Kirill Kaprizov kind of give that fan base this life and say, hey, we can get out of this division. We can get into the second, third round of the playoffs. I think that's going to be huge for hockey. So hopefully they can keep that going. And yeah, turning me into a little bit of a closeted Wild fan, which is interesting.
That's what Matt and I talked about a couple shows ago. Was since we've started this podcast, it seems impossible to root against anybody right now. For me, it's the LA Kings. I am also going to give shout outs to the Wild and the Carolina Hurricanes, but the Kings, number 2 in the NHL, and a team that almost all of us had missing the playoffs or a preliminary wild card spot, getting that last spot in. The Kings have blown it out of the water so far, getting good enough goaltending. And Darcy Kemper's been out of the crease hurt. He just came back after missing a couple weeks with injury. David Riddick picked up right where he left off. And the Kings are the team to beat right now. I'm going to switch mine up a little. I'm going to go one team, one player, and one storyline that I'm impressed with. So it's the Kings for my team. Player, Alexander Barkov. The guy was absolutely phenomenal this week. He gets my first star. How about a way to come back home? And we talked about the global series, the 5-point weekend that he put up. And man, that's got to feel good for him and the entire country of Finland. So Alexander Barkov is the player that I'm impressed with. In the storyline, Pyotr Kochetkov has a chance to claim the Carolina Hurricanes crease. Freddie Anderson, as always, out due to some injury. Kochetkov, the future of Carolina's crease, now with a chance to really cement his mark as the 1A goaltender. I'm keeping an eye on that, but so far, he's impressed. He is undefeated to start this season.
Yeah, and Casey, talking about some goaltending, and I wanted to test your trivia a little bit here with some goaltending trivia. So right now we know Connor Hellebuck leading the league in shutouts with 2. Do you know what other 2 goaltenders are tied with him?
For 2 shutouts this season.
Mm-hmm. And it's minimum 5 games played.
All right. Give me conference.
So I gotta brush up on my conferences. Woo. Let's see.
East or West? East or West?
It's East. Both are East.
My initial thought was Jake Allen with the Devils. Is it?
That is correct.
That's what that was who I was thinking. Let's go.
So the Devils for the Metro, there's 1 in the Atlantic.
In the Atlantic. 2 shutouts. Is it Stolars?
No, it is not. You
All
should know this guy. I'll give you a little bit of a hint there. You should know this guy, especially with some of your recent headgear.
Is it Anton Forsberg with the Sens?
It is.
Yes.
So interesting names to tie up with Helly up there. We all expected Hellebuck to be up there, but Anton Forsberg with 2 shutouts and Jake Allen, all 3 of them tied for first. And to round out like the top 5 in there, there's also Igor Shesterkin and Lucas Dostal. Stolars is in there with 1. Cam Talbot, Jake Ottinger, Alex Lyon, and Kevin Lankinen are all with 1. So a lot of teams with 1 shutout, but those 3 at the top. So just a little trivia in there to get you going. But if any of the viewers guessed that, comment that down below.
And the very interesting note on that, both of those are the backup goaltenders. Doves paid all that money to bring Markstrom in, and Allen has been the one taking the crease. And same in Ottawa. Linus Allmark on the $8 million deal. Forsberg shining the light. Jake, who's depressing you, unlike those goaltenders that are outstanding with the shutouts?
Right now, it's going to be the Flames. And we pretty much all took them to be one of the last place teams in the NHL. And they surprised us, coming out really, really hot. But now they're starting to come a little bit back down to earth. And they're 7-5-1, so they're still above 500, but they're 4-5-1 in their last 10. They have a -2 goal differential right now. And I think they're kind of cooling off a little bit. Somebody took an extinguisher to the Flames. And I think that they're still going to be a better team than we thought they were from the start of the season. But I think with Edmonton getting McDavid back, the Kraken looking a little bit better, even though they've lost a couple. And then you also have the Canucks, the Knights, and the Kings in that division. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for them to keep up that start. So that's my number 1. My number 2 is going to be the New York Islanders. And I don't really have a lot to say about this team because I'm not a huge into the Metropolitan other than the Blue Jackets. So they're 5-6-2. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10, and they just have kind of been a non-entity for me in this season. And it's weird to say about a New York team, but I guess when you get relegated to Long Island, this is what happens. But I think this is an interesting team. But I mean, you barely beat Buffalo, you barely beat Pittsburgh, you lose to the other New York team in the Rangers, and it's just like, what's going on? Like, this is a team where historically there's been a lot of success, but recently I think they've just kind of said, hey, we have the talent, let's see what we can do, and they just haven't really added to it. So it's just a confusing team for me, and it kind of makes me a little depressed because they could be a huge team in the East if they wanted to be, that kind of cap room. And last but not least for me is going to be the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think that they're kind of in the same boat as the Islanders for me, where we a little bit better, where they've had some quality wins and they've had some quality players, but they've lost their last 3 and they just don't look cohesive to me. So with that Atlantic being as tight as it is, I'm hoping that they can kind of get it together and put up a respectable record in the last couple months of this calendar year so they can go into the new year kind of feeling like, okay, we have a shot to get out of the Atlantic. But I mean, I'm not too worried about them just because of that organization, and I think their base is really, really solid. But a little bit of depression for the 4-6-0 in their last 10 and losing their last 3. So
for me, Nashville is number 1, and obviously when they're already having talks about potentially starting the rebuild, a brutal start, and every time it seems like it's going to get back on track, they go on a 2-game skid. This week, they lose to Edmonton at home, and then they lose again last night. So the Predators are on my list of thumbs down. Alexander Georgiev has been officially cut from the Ditsy's Dogs. The 4th-round pick, no longer on the team. He is depressing me for sure. A player I'll add on there as well, Patrick Kane, has been off to an extremely slow start with the Red Wings, also cut from the Ditsy's Dogs fantasy team. And finally, my storyline, the Montreal Canadiens lose back-to-back games on the road, finishing it off with a loss to the Penguins. They dropped to last place in the Eastern Conference, last place also in the Atlantic, obviously. So the Canadiens need to figure something out there. Martin St. Louis, the seat's starting to get a little bit hotter, even though the Canadiens have backed him and said his job is not in jeopardy anytime in the near term. But the noise around the Canadiens after they had a hot start starting to pick up a little bit. That does it for Impressed and Depressed. We'll be back after the interview segment. Jake and I are going to take a quick break. And while we do that, Anthony Callin will join on the show, former captain of the Clarkson Golden Knights and current ECHL Worcester Railer. You're listening to the Fifth Liners Hockey Podcast. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome on now, former Clarkson Golden Knights captain and current ECHL Worcester Railers star, Anthony Callin. Callie, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Ditz, how we doing?
Not too bad. Even more better now that we've got this one set up here. So we were supposed to have your brother on. We'll talk a little bit about him, but you and your brother both on to pro careers now and both coming out of the NCAA. So let's go all the way back to your childhood. Obviously, he probably is the influence for you. What got you guys started in the game of hockey?
So a lot of my mom's side of the family was heavily involved in hockey, and they still are. Currently for me and my brother, as you mentioned, we call him my uncle. He's a little more distant than that, but he's our agent, and he actually is an agent for NHL players. So that was his job. There's other family members that are agents. My actual uncle just got hired. He's on the coaching staff for the Montreal Canadiens. He was a coach at Vermont and Brown for a while. So all of my mom's side has a very heavy influence for hockey. And I think that they probably pushed us into that really early when we were young. And we ended up liking it, me and my brother. And obviously when you have a brother that's involved too, you have that friendly competition growing up. And that always helps with kind of the passion for the game and keeping playing when you're young.
Your brother's in his 7th season pro currently with the Springfield Thunderbirds, also played with the Worcester Railers. You're now on the Railers coming off captaining the Golden Knights 3 seasons ago. He played NCAA with Bentley University, a former rival of mine, and I was probably front row screaming at him when he was out visiting the RIT Tigers back growing up, which is a funny connection as well. What was it like growing up in the Callin household, the day-to-day? You mentioned having him being there to push you. What was it like for you trying to chase his footsteps?
I mean, specifically for hockey, I've followed him in a sense because he's kind of paved such a good path. Most recently, when it's come to Worcester, the connection actually was that his captain, when he was at Worcester, ended up being the coach and general manager when I was there my last year. So that's kind of how the connection came about. And like they loved him in Worcester and stuff like that. He's always been good at kind of making good relationships at places. So that's kind of, he's helped me out in that sense. But I think going back to our childhood, we were just a very competitive household. I have an oldest sister. She went a different route, and she was a Division I platform diver at the University of Missouri. So we were always just very athletic, always outside, whether it be hockey, knee hockey, golf around the house, basketball. It was just always competitive. And I think that that competitiveness is what kind of drove us getting it to the next level and kind of growing from there.
From out in Wisconsin, you played your whole career out in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a nice feature that we don't see a lot of guys that get to the level you're at have the opportunity to do. Most guys have to move away from home. Talk about the benefits of being able to go all the way through 14U and even up to the USHL and still staying local, where you're able to be around your family and continue to grow without having to move far away from home.
Yeah, that was awesome. Obviously living at home, at that age, you probably don't like living at home as much. You want to move away, but looking back now, I'm glad I was able to spend that extra time with my parents, my family. And I mean, I grew up working at the rink that we ended up playing at for the USHL team. Drove the Zamboni there, sweeping locker rooms and stuff. So that was kind of my summer job. Being able to kind of transfer for that into playing there in front of fans was awesome, and being in the hometown there. And because we lived so close to the rink for a couple of years, we had some billet brothers from some players that came from out of town and stayed at our house for the year. So I was able to have that connection with some players. And I think it was just an awesome experience that, like you said, not a lot of people are blessed to have. And with my house being 5 minutes from the rink, it's pretty lucky that you're able to say that you could do that.
You and your brother both made the decision to go to the NCAA, and at the level you guys are at, probably had the opportunity to play in other different juniors leagues. But obviously the education is a big factor when you make that decision. For each of you, what went into that decision rather than trying to go chase the higher level of Canadian juniors hockey, rather staying in the U.S. and going and playing NCAA?
I would say that my mom, being a teacher, had a big influence on that. I don't think she obviously supported us with hockey and everything, what us to do with hockey, but was always making sure that we were working to get our degrees, making sure we got that good education. So that definitely, I don't even think that major juniors was a thought in our household. It was kind of just wanted to go up that kind of American route of hockey. And my sister playing college sports, being the first one to do that for us three, kind of laid the foundation for me and my brother to follow. And my parents also did play some college sports as well growing up, or when they went to college. So I think it was just college was the thought process right from the get-go.
2018-19, you made the jump to the NCAA, playing at Clarkson. A few years after that, you'd have me chasing your coattails around for a few years. What was it about Clarkson that stood out to you?
Clarkson kind of approached me in a very quick manner. They reached out at the end of my USHL season, and I was kind of finishing up my last couple games thinking like, okay, I'm playing another year of USHL. Like, no need to rush getting into college. And they reached out. I was able to come on a visit, and I just kind of liked the small town feel of it. Was able to get shown around and just kind of talk to some big name guys like Nico and Russell were the ones that kind of showed me the ropes during my visit. And I just liked the small feel, the kind of history of the hockey. And I knew that would be a place where I would kind of thrive. So the decision was pretty easy once I left my visit, and next day told them that I was ready to come.
The names hanging behind me, Sturm and Josh Dunn. You also mentioned Devin Brasso, who's currently playing out in the KHL. Those guys were all leaders that were ahead of you. You went on to be both an assistant captain in the 21-22 season and a captain in the following year after that. What were the biggest leadership core values that were instilled early in your first couple of years playing under those guys?
I think Clarkson just inherently is the like blue collar underdog. That's kind of the mentality that they've always taken in comparison to like a Big Ten school that's big name. We're not necessarily known throughout the U.S. just for our college. Like, people will know University of Wisconsin, they'll know what Penn State is because their football programs and stuff like that. So I think that they just kind of helped establish or continue to establish the Clarkson culture. I don't know if it was necessarily them. It might have even been years beforehand too that they just kind of carried it along. So yeah, it wasn't much new when I became captain. It was just, hey, these are the values that they taught me, that the person before them taught them, that I just have to teach the younger guys, like, hey, this is what Clarkson is. This is kind of our MO, and this is what makes us be a winning team. And especially with my freshman year, they were able to establish that pretty quickly and show me that.
You guys played in quite a few big games, won an ECAC championship, also appeared in a few NCAA tournaments. You also had a few games that you returned back. You played in Wisconsin against the Badgers in front of a hometown crowd that you're on the other side of. Obviously, the St. Lawrence rivalries are games every year that stand out. Looking back at the ECAC schedule for Clarkson specifically, what games are most memorable to you looking back on your college career?
I think it's hard for me to say or to not say the ECAC championship game. That was obviously a huge game. Always get a laugh of my good buddy Chris Clack not getting the celebration with the team, everyone going to the wrong guy. He'll never live that down. But that game obviously stands out. I was lucky enough to play in Wisconsin a good amount of times, like going into my college career, and I thought maybe that would happen, and was able to go a couple of different years. And those were always awesome because big family showing up and stuff like that. But yeah, you pretty much nailed all the ones. Wisconsin, ECAC championship game would probably stick out as the number one, and then every every St. Lawrence game, but if I had to choose a second for me personally, it was against a SLU weekend. It was me and Dunner, I believe the night before, scored the OT winner to win, and then I scored the OT winner the next night, or it might have been vice versa. And scoring an OT winner against SLU is always feels good, especially at home too. So that was a big one for me. But there's so many games looking back at it now, and I think you mentioned a lot of them.
I think I could pick out both of those goals. That was the 2019-20 season. That would have been my freshman year. That year revolutionized the development of a lot of hockey players. And in your case, it ended up being an advantage. You're the first guy that we've had on our show that's an active player that was through college throughout the entire COVID pandemic. For you guys, it was devastating when it happened. The team was up in the top 3 nationally, on an absolute tear, headed to be one of the favorites in the NCAA tournament. And then the pandemic hits, didn't even get to have an ECAC championship run where it would have been you guys and Cornell, who was also in the top 3 heavy favorites to meet up in Lake Placid there. Also didn't get, obviously, a run to make a chance at an NCAA tournament run. Looking back at that season, the whole experience, everything that went on, you decided to stay at Clarkson. That's when the transfer portal rules all changed up. You stuck with it through that season where Clarkson was one of the few teams playing, no fans in the stands, any of that. Talk about the experience of, just the whole 360 of going from being one of the top programs in the country to being one of the only programs in the country that was able to play.
Yeah, that was crazy. And looking back at those teams, not that I would wish for COVID to happen again, obviously, but I think that time frame brought the team so close together because we were all just trying to get through it. I know that it was long years for guys that we couldn't go home for Christmas, couldn't see family, guys couldn't see their girlfriends or anything like that for the whole year. So we were super tight as a group, and you just kind of had to try to find something to keep it going. Like practice wasn't necessarily, guys didn't want to be there maybe one day just because they're down in the dumps and stuff like that. So it was just a lot of team bonding and kind of figuring that out from a personal level. And just checking in on guys outside of hockey, like, hey, like, how you doing? And stuff like that. Like, forget the hockey. And I think that that opened my eyes a little bit of that sense. Like, yeah, you're a team, you want to win and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we're all humans. So you got to just check on each other. And that was a tough time for everyone. And like I said, I think it brought the team closer together. And I think because of those times, those seasons, I'm still in contact with a lot of those guys just because of how much we were together and stuff like that.
You can hear the leadership caliber for the fans listening. You went on to be the assistant captain the following season, the captain in your 5th year. And the positive that came out of that pandemic was the ability for all of the athletes in that scenario to go and play 5th years. For you, it led to a 5th year staying at Clarkson and pursuing a master's degree. Talk about the decision to not only stay in the NCAA, but also stay with Clarkson.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said, or the question you asked before too. For my family and my parents, like, degree was big, and yeah, COVID wasn't great, but it gave me the opportunity to get an MBA, which I never thought that I was going to be able to, no matter what I was doing. So that checked the box to stay for a 5th year. And then I just, knowing that I kind of missed some seasons and stuff like that, I felt like I was in no rush to kind of go anywhere and wanted to come back for that 5th year, and always loved Clarkson. So I didn't feel like I needed to try to go anywhere else. Clarkson was home for me. So it was kind of a pretty easy decision to come back for that 5th year.
You've come back to campus a couple times since. You and I were both on campus this past summer for one of the alumni events where everyone comes back and stays in the dorms. And there was all kinds of guys from back as far as the 1960s of alumni that came to stay in the dorms for that week. Talking to the big group there, and all kinds of accoladed alumni, a couple of NHL guys, Benny Sexton, one of the guys that we had on the show earlier this summer. What were some of the biggest stories that stood out to you in the lasting culture of Clarkson University?
I think I mentioned a little bit of it earlier, but it's like the traditions have stayed. Like we were talking about them and stuff that they did as a team, little team bonding things, and the stuff you do before the season and stuff like that. And like they did the same thing. It was almost identical to us. And you think like, oh, like some of that stuff fades after a couple of years. Guys try to like do a different little team bonding activity, stuff like that. But it was the exact same. And I think that shows from what I said about the captains when I came in. It's just kind of transferring that tradition. So it was just kind of funny to listen to those guys say the same things and just talk hockey, talk. I think college hockey has changed a lot even since I've graduated in the past 2 years, and talking to them too. It's just a different landscape. So getting a different point of view. Obviously the locker room and facilities and stuff like that, way different for them. So that was awesome being able to catch up with those guys and make that type of connection.
Highlight of my hockey career came that week playing in the alumni game, beat you in a draw quick. After that 22-23 season, you signed your first professional deal with Worcester, following in your brother's footsteps again. Talk about the moment that you found out you were going to be moving on to the pro ranks and what the signing process was like on the player side.
Yeah, it was exciting. I was excited to get going. It's interesting because you go from your season ending in college to gearing up to join a team that's on a playoff push. So it's like you kind of have to mentally snap back into it and be like, hey, even though the season just ended and we got eliminated, unfortunately, I have to dial back in and get ready to help this team win right away, because they were on a playoff push and end up going into the last game of the season that we needed to win, and we didn't end up winning to make playoffs. But I think it was awesome, and it was a easy transition because of my brother. Like I said, everyone knew him there, everyone liked him there. So probably for the 2 months I was there or whatever it was, I was known as Drew's brother. But I think in that time I was able to make a name for myself too, and kind of establish myself there.
How much of an inspiration has your brother been? And obviously the goal is always to get to the next level. That would be the AHL from where you are. Your brother started with Worcester, and he's now made a pretty illustrious career on a one-way in the AHL, where you're trying to do the exact same thing now. How much has your brother inspired you in that sense?
He's a huge inspiration for me, especially now that I'm in that pro level, because he's been there for a while. I think the casual hockey fan doesn't understand how much it takes to jump from the ECHL to the AHL, and how hard it is to make that jump and also stick it. And he was able to get called up, and he never came back, not even for a day, which is, I think, a huge bonus for him, and just shows how hard he works at it. And he was doing that coming off of a season where COVID, Worcester didn't play. So he went and tried to play for Rapid City in the ECHL and was there for a couple games, and then pretty much didn't play a season because of COVID, and then followed it up and was able to make that jump. And I think he just taught me a lot about hockey and kind of knowing what your role is on a team and how to show a GM or a scout how you fit into a roster spot.
You had a breakout season last year, and maybe one of the best of your career, 49 points in 67 games played with Worcester. Now looking forward for you individually, where are some of your personal goals going into this season?
For this season, our team's talk with all the returners has been playoffs as the minimum. Like I said, 2 years ago, it came down to the last game. We didn't make playoffs. Last season, it came down to the last game. We didn't win, didn't make playoffs. So it was 2 years in a row that happened. So we feel that we need to make playoffs. And like I said, that's a minimum. And from there, we got to push to make a good playoff run. And I think for me personally, coming back as a returner, there's not a lot of returners on our team, a lot of young guys. So being a leader, trying to establish myself and hopefully put up some points that'll help the team win as well.
And again, the core leadership showing through is the question about goals goes straight to we and the team. Callie, last one for you. For any younger players that are trying to follow in the exact same steps that you are here and looking to make it to the pro ranks, what would your advice be in being able to handle the steps when you have to step from each next level? For you, it was juniors to the NCAA to the ECHL, but however those players are doing it, what advice would you have for them?
I would say know your role. And this gets tied into my brother kind of teaching me this as well. And I've learned it too, is you don't necessarily have to be the top goal scorer on every team to make it to the next level. That's not the rankings of who they call up. It could be the guy who has a 70% win faceoff percentage and is super good on PK, which is essentially how my brother got to the AHL, and that's his core strengths. Yeah, he puts up points, but that's kind of how he got there, and then the points followed. So know what your strengths are and really play into them, whether that be the small little things of killing penalties or blocking shots or whatever that is. Really lean into those strengths because that's what will get you there, and then the skill and points will follow with the opportunity after you get there. That would be my biggest thing for anyone trying to make any sort of jump to the next level.
Anthony Callin and the Worcester Railers are now about a month into their season. Callie, always a pleasure catching up with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ditz. This was awesome.
Huge thanks to Anthony Callin. Awesome story. And Jake, what a leader. You had the opportunity just as well as I did to watch his performance in the green and gold, and even better guy off the ice than on the ice in Cali.
Yeah, he's been such a pleasure to watch from his early days as a freshman when I came in, and then his fifth-year senior season where he was one of the undisputed leaders in that locker room. So thanks, Callie. Hopefully we can go out to Worcester and catch an East Coast game, see you play. So
we were talking about that after we stopped recording. Maybe once the college season's over, zip out to Boston real quick. Jake, time to party. The parlay party. You had a little bit of a tougher week than I did last week. I was undefeated. That streak has come to a close since. But let's try to get back on track here. We'll start on Thursday. I got the Hurricanes money line. I think their hot streak is going to extend until they lose on Saturday against the Avalanche. But the Hurricanes win at home on Thursday against the Penguins, and the Senators money line on Thursday. Those are my two.
So, Casey, it sounds like you're picking with your heart instead of your head. I don't know. Those two homer team picks, but I think the Hurricanes will take that one on Thursday, but I think Sid the Kid going to get a point against those Hurricanes and extend his amazing season and keep his longevity going for this season.
I would double down on that as well, actually. Crosby had, I forget the number. They showed it on one of the streams last year. Crosby has scored a point in almost every game he's played against the Carolina Hurricanes through his history. So I definitely agree with that one. Friday, the Maple Leafs money line for me is the Leafs host the Red Wings.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to keep with the fun nicknames. Kirill the Thrill, anytime goal scorer against my Anaheim Ducks. Kirill Kaprizov has just been outstanding this year, and I think he's going to get one past. I mean, Anaheim has just not looked great, as they should, but I think he's going to do it on Friday.
On to Saturday. For me, it's the Avalanche taking down the Carolina Hurricanes. Canes have to head out west, Avs at home, and talked about how much we like the Avalanche as they continue back to health. Miles Wood might be making his debut back from injury in that game. Keep an eye on the Avs in the 9 o'clock game. And going the complete opposite of Thursday, the Sens lose. They're on the road at Boston. And the Bruins money line is the second pick for Saturday.
Yeah, the return of Linus Olmark. We'll see how that goes over with the Boston fans. For me on Saturday, I'm going to take a little bit of a sneaky pick, and one of my depressed teams to lose, I'm taking Buffalo's money line against Calgary. I think Buffalo has enough offense in them to upset the Flames and kind of rock their world on Saturday.
And finish it off here with Sunday. I'm going to take a couple, stick with the money lines. The Devils money line at home against the Sharks. There's got to be no way they lose that one, and I'll up it to Devils win in regulation. That would be a big buzzkill for the Devils to lose to a beat-up Sharks team, even though Celebrini is back in the lineup. And I'm going to take the over in the Blue Jackets and Ducks game after hammering the under in yesterday's Blue Jackets-Sharks game. I think the Ducks and the Jackets, two high-flying offenses, that one is going to be high scoring.
And for me to close it out, I'm also looking at the Blue Jackets and Anaheim game. Two of my favorite teams, Anaheim, my true favorite team, but Columbus, a little bit of a homer pick since I'm at the home of their AHL affiliate, the Cleveland Monsters. I'm going to take Columbus to take down Anaheim, but I'm going to have Frank Vetrano as an anytime point scorer. He's been doing pretty well for the Ducks, so I think he's going to keep it going on Sunday.
Let's put a wrap on it, buddy, as this podcast drops here on Thursday. A big announcement coming out, the PWHL jerseys that they foreshadowed here today on Wednesday, and could be some snazzy threats.
Yeah, and I'm excited. I don't have any PWHL merch yet. I was waiting until the team names got announced, so might have to look into getting some of it. But yeah, I'm excited. From the little snippets they showed, they look pretty good, and Bowers on this one as well, and I really like their products, so hoping for the best.
I was impressed by the Ottawa Charge foreshadowing that they put out there. That might be the one I go with. Steph Markowski coming in town, and she's going to play with us tomorrow night in Beer League. That's going to be a blast. RIP to all the old guys that play with us, and possibly a future member of the show in Markowski, but it'll be fun to have her on the ESPN broadcast. The women take on RPI and Union this week, starting their first home ECAC segment, and then Hockey Fights Cancer games for us on Saturday, which is exciting to look forward. Always a great cause with the American Cancer Society. So the women play RPI 3 o'clock on Saturday, and then the men are hosting Stonehill Saturday at 7 o'clock. Jake, what do you got going on this weekend?
Not too much, Casey. I think I'm just kind of taking it easy. I'm actually on call for work starting Friday, so can't really do much over the weekend. But I'll be watching some college hockey. I'll be watching some NHL, and then maybe some NBA. Very rare for me, but the Cavs, an undefeated start to the season, so I might have to start watching that.
Enjoy it, buddy. We'll catch up later in the weekend, and looking forward to an episode early next week as Haley Wynn will be joining us fresh off the Global Series as the U.S. and Canada taking on a couple of games this week. And then a very exciting one a couple weeks from now, Pierre Maguire will be joining the Fifth Liners Hockey Podcast. So a lot to look forward to. Make sure to like and subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, wherever you've been listening. Also, check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Fifth Liners Pod on Instagram and TikTok. That's the number 5 TH Liners Pod, and at Fifth Line Pod on X. That does it here for episode 17. Till next time, have a good one, everybody.